for choosing this session and for being with us from the start. And so my name is Peris Wakesho, and I work for Ashoka. I lead the work around children and youth years in Africa. First, before I introduce the panelists, I think I would love to just share briefly about this session and why this session. And so I think all of us know that Africa is the youngest continent. At 65% of the population, then it means that the most important thing for Africa right now is an education system that will allow our children and young people to grow up to be able to make meaningful and impactful contribution. And so then being home to such a young population and knowing that historically, Africa's education system has faced 4 major challenges. One being equity, the other one learning, relevance, and affordability. And with the advent of COVID-19 this year, we've seen almost 1.9 billion learners out of school. So what does that mean for us with the challenges that already exist in our education system? And now we are having more challenges compounded by COVID-19, which basically might cut across around still issues of relevance, affordability, accessibility, and learning itself. So what we want to ask ourselves in this station is, despite the situation, we know that there's an opportunity because we have social innovators, Ashoka Fellows, and other social innovators that are leading the way to design solutions that are cutting across both ancient, if I may call them, or historical challenges and new and emerging challenges to ensure that then the 1.9 billion learners who are out of school have an opportunity, and or when schools open, and learning will be adapted to support them continue. So today we have an opportunity to hear from leading social entrepreneurs and innovators in the space of education who will be basically sharing their own experience before and during the pandemic and their contributions. And they will then open up the conversation into what next for us, where are we, what needs to happen. And hopefully at the end of this session, we will all have an opportunity to join a network of educators or people who are investing in education in Africa so that we can take the conversation to the next level. So our session is going to be in 4 parts: the social entrepreneurs and innovators and their work in relation to education, new learning, and the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we will have a question and answer session with them to elaborate on a few key things that then opens up the session to all the people in the audience to be able to either comment, input, or ask questions. After that, then we'll have a wrap-up round. So feel free to put your questions in the chat if need be. And then when we have the open sessions, you could also voice some of them out. So for now, let me invite our 3 panelists. That is Karima, Dr. Taddy Blecher, and Nombulelo. So I will ask Karima to start us off with self-introduction in line of today's conversation and your contribution. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tout le monde. My name is Karima Grant. I'm an Ashoka Fellow from since 2016. I'm the founder and director of Imagination Africa and Curry Imagination. We have been working on building the ecosystem because we understand that it's rarely children that are the obstacles to becoming change makers, but the adults and the capacity of the adults and the structures that surround children. And so since 2011, we've been focusing on how to strengthen those structures, those adults, those institutions, those public spaces that surround children. Today, the initiative that we're starting is really, once again, taking an ecosystem approach and really thinking about using other actors, really using the media, really thinking about using local artists to help us to create children's television programming. We have an understanding that 62% of television is the best way to reach children through learning. We understand that 62% globally has been the way that children have been reaching some kind of learning. So we understand that it's very, very important. It's also something that can be modified for other platforms as well. So excited to be here. Very, very honored to be on the same platform as my brother in Ashoka, Dr. Taddy Blecher. So thank you.
Peris, thank you very much. And Karima, thank you so much for everything you're doing. And it's such a great joy to be with fellow changemakers. And we all give our lives every day for this work. And for everybody that's involved in education, I feel like really we brothers and sisters on this mission to change education and make education accessible to everybody. I think, as Peris said at the beginning, this is the youngest continent, 60% of the population under the age of 25. Just think about that. I mean, just think, that's unbelievable. That's like over 600 million young people under the age of 25, children really. And just the numbers and scale is kind of mind-boggling. And so I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Marishi Invincibility Institute. We've been focused on providing free access to university education for about 20 years now. We've helped to create a variety of institutions across South Africa, and but we do take students from 17 countries across Africa. And Marishi Invincibility Institute now is based in Johannesburg, in Durban, in Cape Town, and we have a nature reserve campus in Mpumalanga province. And our dream now, and I think from COVID, you know, having gone online with everything, is really to build something Pan-African, which we could partner with other social entrepreneurs in other countries, because we've developed so much content and systems and processes and policies and so on. So the idea would be, you know, to do this in many countries over time. And central to our model is that every single human being and every child across our continent is, you know, is a genius waiting to happen, has infinite human potential, and that we can take marginalized youth and really help them develop extraordinary careers. So we focus on taking youth that can't get into the conventional universities and colleges, and then we give them access to not just the education, food, books, materials, self-development programs, technology, internet, everything. And they really get an incredible education. And we have won some wonderful awards locally and globally for the model that we have. But then the goal is to get these youth properly into the middle class. And so we've helped now over 19,000 youth to come out of poverty and come into the middle class. So that's on the university side. And then for the last 9 years, I've been involved with national government. And we have this initiative mentioned called E-Cubed, which is about putting entrepreneurship and project-based learning and game-based and play-based learning for the younger children into the whole South African school system. So it becomes less just about exams and memorization and much more about real learning and making school fun and exciting and a place that kids want to run to rather than run away from, because in South Africa, millions of our children over the years have run away from school. And the goal is to make school so enjoyable, exciting, centered around the children and so on. So we're doing a pilot over the next 3 years. We have funding from Lego and some other funders globally and locally. But the goal is to work with 2.5 million learners of the over 12 million learners in South Africa, but to grow that over time. And it is a national policy now to implement this initiative, in the South African school system. So thank you so much. And it's just so wonderful what Ashoka is doing just to help all of us. And we're always deeply grateful for that. So thank you to all the Ashoka staff that are here and everyone else that is involved with our work all the time. So thank you so much.
Next, last but not least, I would like to call Nombulelo. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. It's Peris. I'm the executive director of the Agenda 2063 Academy, which is currently based in Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. And we believe as an academy that we can't even begin to talk about Agenda 2063 unless we start with prioritizing transforming education. And we all know that once we start prioritizing education and transforming it, then it's easier for the other aspirations.
And even as we plan and design solutions, I am sure these are some of the things that we need to have in mind in terms of connectivity, how strong, how good it is, and how do we ensure that then it's really helping us get to the next level. Yeah, so if we can share one thing that we would love to take out of this session based on the introductions we've had before we move on to the next conversation.
I think it's very helpful. Everybody's writing in the chat here about just sharing the one thing that they would like to take out of the session.
So one of the questions here is how, from Ivy says, how can we join forces to make our education system bridge the gap between knowledge-based learning and the unemployment in the labor market?
Wonderful. Thank you, Ife. Firstly, I think joining forces is very important because certainly in education, we've all got things that we can share. So we can share curriculum, we can share policies, procedures, processes, even inspiration, etc. And certainly we, like on our side in the Mauritian Institute, are always happy to share with other social entrepreneurs. So we have shared a lot of curriculum and methods and so on. I think this key thing is for education to bridge the gap between knowledge-based learning and unemployment, because it's important firstly to move from knowledge is important, but young people need skills as well, and those skills need to be things around which professional market is looking in terms of employability, and then also competencies. There's a big growing rise in competencies, and so developing creativity, problem-solving ability to work with other people, etc. This needs to be built into curriculum. One can't just assume that it's going to happen. So it needs to be built into the way of learning, and so that learning can be more student-centered, more project-based, and that learners can actually have experiences to solve problems that they're passionate about and that they care about. And this is how one can bring the idea of everyone a change maker into education, because young people can solve issues that they're passionate about and that they care about. And so the labor market is changing a lot, and obviously with artificial intelligence and robotics and machine learning and everything else, what they call the fourth industrial revolution that we all know about, it is essential to teach young people well, to prepare them for a world with almost infinite data and with a huge digital component to every single kind of career or profession. And the exciting thing is that a lot of these materials are available for free on the internet, and world-class materials. So if anyone's not sure where to find these things, we can help on all this type of thing. But you can train young people in Cisco skills for free to become network engineers, in Amazon Web Services, in cloud, in app development with Google, with Microsoft, with there's just so many of these things where content is available, and one can look at all the MOOCs as well. people like edX, Coursera, Udemy, Udacity, 2U, etc. So I think it is very important that all of us involved in education, we realize that we're not educating youth in a vacuum. We have to prepare them for a modern economy, and we're not serving them if we don't do that. So in the most efficient, effective way, we've got to help prepare them. And it's not just that somebody has to learn a skill, because skills are going to always be updated and changing and so on. We need to teach youth the mindset of being lifelong learners, how to learn quickly, find information, how to analyze data, how to use information, how to do analysis, synthesis, all these things, which are the skills that they need to be successful in the world today. But certainly happy to talk on that more with anybody.
And so then allow me to move to the next line of conversation, which basically now looking at the work that our three panelists are doing in light of COVID-19 and education and new ways of learning. For Karima, what are we doing well considering the current new normal, and what has been fronted as the existing challenges facing education in Africa?
Thank you. I think one of the things that we're doing well is a very slight paradigm shift. I mean, I think when we heard Dr. Taddy speak, we and even when we look at all the questions that are in the chat or these comments, is that we're all agreed that there's something has to be changed in the educational system. And I think even 5 years, 10 years ago, these were not things that were necessarily givens. But I think worldwide and across the continent, we see the AU, we see there's a lot of organizations that are working about building up and changing the type of skills that are happening for young people and for children in terms of school systems. And so as we're seeing some policy changes. In some countries, we're seeing some investment even in terms of government investment into different areas of strengthening educational systems. So I think that's positive. I think we do have to recognize that there are more and more people that are realizing that change has to happen. I think one thing that happened with COVID is that we were all confronted with the fact that change has to happen now. And so that the timeline that perhaps we were all wanted to work on, which was maybe a 10-year timeline or a 20-year timeline, really got sped up. And now we understand that really our current educational systems are not built to be able to support the enormous number of young people and the enormous amount of change makers that we need. One thing that I think we need to really look at, and we've been really excited to be doing this work in Senegal, is to really be thinking about who are the roles of other actors. Again, I think Taddy really raised about the fact that we have to be thinking about the skills that are needed, about the fact that we know that, collaboration, critical thinking, and problem solving are these core components of learning now. And one of the things we have to think about is how many teachers across the continent are equipped to be able to teach this, or to foster this, or to grow this at any age, whether it be at the university level, or for us, where we're very much concerned at the preschool level. How do we do so? I find very often that it's very interesting that for us, when we talk about digital education for children, we're still very much at let's get tablets into children's hands, and not necessarily about how do we integrate coding. So it's not necessarily just taking a coding class, but how do we integrate that into core curriculum? How do we make sure that even our schools that are in the most remote areas, our telecommunications industries are supporting them to make sure that they have access? There's all kinds of ways to have remote access now, but we still haven't sort of done those connections. So I think one of the challenges that we're facing is really this understanding that it's not going to be a Department of Education, it's not going to be a handful of social entrepreneurs, it's going to be an ecosystem of actors that have to come together, that are each playing a role to be able to support education and support learning. When we talk about lifelong learning, we have to understand that learning is something that's embedded in life. It is not something that just happens in classrooms. classrooms, so that where are the other opportunities and the other spaces where we can embed, we can highlight learning that happens there? How do we support the learning that can happen in spaces that are outside of our classrooms? So many of our children, as we saw through COVID, were not learning in classrooms, whether it was because of the pandemic or whether it was because the pandemic shut them, because of accessibility issues beforehand. And one of the things that we saw was that parents were incredibly ill-equipped to be able to support learning, because one, there's still some confusion about how learning happens with children. How does a human being learn? And I think that that's something that we really need to embrace. It's something we really need to be able to talk about, is that when we're talking about education, what is the parental education that happens? How do we empower parents to be able to understand? Because we still have parents who still are very resistant to, if a child decides, if a young person decides that they want to do a certain track for education, and the parents are saying, no, we prefer them to do another track. Here in Senegal, we've just lost over 600 young people are still taking boats to migrate to Europe. And we've had over 600 that have died. And a lot of that is because of parental pressure. So when we're talking about education, I think that the thing that I'm so excited to be part of Ashoka is that we switch from talking about education to learning. And really, when we talk about learning, we involve other actors. So now the question is, what is the role of those of us who are educators, who are social innovators in education, to begin to equip and support the other actors who can actually help us strengthen our learning systems?
Thank you very much, Karima. I think you've touched on pertinent issues that, yes, we've always known that some things needed to change in the education sector, and there are players that were working on that. But then with the advent of COVID, then the change had to happen now. We don't have the time. And so then with that also, we are realizing there are other things that needed to be looked at, the role of other actors, at the teachers ready. So in light with all this conversation, we have other players, and the Africa Union is also working with African governments and other players to really front an approach that is called DOTS. So really that's then in times of COVID, what can help us leapfrog forward is that then we need digital connectivity of schools. We need to look at online learning and teachers as facilitators and motivators of learning, and then also consider the safety online and offline, and then focus more on skill learning. So to you, Dr. Teddy Blecher, do you think these are the only issues that we look at what has been neglected before, or is there something else that we've continued to neglect and we need to consider, so that then we are living in this time and emerging out of them better prepared, looking at the whole education system in Africa?
Beautiful, wonderful question. Thank you. And Karima, thanks for your words before. I think so much wisdom in all of that. Yeah, so I'd kind of answer this question, I think, in three parts. The first one is just, let's just acknowledge how incredible it has been to be able to leverage technology during this pandemic. Now, we know we have an aching digital divide, and so many youth in Africa did get left behind, which is extremely sad. But a digital divide is something that governments and private sector can tackle, and there is, growing initiatives, whether it's using satellites or balloons, hot air balloons that Google's working on, or other innovatives to bring kind of internet to everybody. So we can focus on the fact that maybe 461 million kids, according to UNICEF, haven't, out of the 1.5 billion or whatever who have been out of school because schools have been closed. So maybe just almost 500 million weren't able to access learning or education. But what's incredible is that just over 1 billion could access. And imagine if this pandemic happened 20 years ago, then probably 100 million would have accessed, but not 1 billion. And so that's firstly incredible progress. And hopefully over the next decade, 2 decades, everyone who's working on this bridging the digital divide issue is going to see to it that every single young person everywhere in Africa, everywhere in the world, can access the whole world's knowledge and information. And it's something we've got to celebrate where we've already got to. And then I think the second point on this is on what you're saying, Peris, is that, and Karima mentioned this, is you can't have just a few social entrepreneurs or government on their own, or some companies, doing this. Really, one needs you need to mobilize deep and rich partnerships that are going to have the kind of scale and reach and power and expertise that can bring real system change. And we've been working on this in South Africa for 9 years now, but it's reaping incredible fruit. And so, for example, when COVID came along, because we had already built this relationship, written national policy, etc., with the Department of Basic Education in South Africa, we've been able to develop an app that works on WhatsApp that, for example, like the developers we work with launched for a higher education system, a health check, so that the universities could open in South Africa, and that students wouldn't be allowed onto a university campus unless they'd done this health check at home before coming in, because it pre-tests for COVID symptoms. But that's allowed hundreds of thousands of students to attend universities across South Africa having that application. We've now built the same thing for the school system, and we've built a system to we've written curriculum for the shortened school year that millions of children can now access. We've written support materials for matriculants who are doing their grade 12. But this is because of a deep, deep partnership. And we're just one player that we've helped to galvanize, but government is front and center. But government, and we've brought in private sector, we've got civil society. And I really believe to achieve the kind of system change scale that we all want to achieve in our countries, to your question, Peris, we have to work in these deep alliances that take years to build. They require massive amounts of consultation. It's painstaking, it's very painful. People in government move on and new people come in, and then you lose that relationship and so on. But we have to all find the right people in government that are passionate, that maybe have just had contracts renewed for 5 years, etc., that really are the good people in government, in the private sector, in civil society, to rope together to bring this kind of change. And then the third thing on what you're saying is, I think, if we think of what are the missing things in education that were missing before, that you were saying, I think we all know, and to Karima's point, that education that we use is hundreds of years old. It's like an old shoe that doesn't fit that well anymore. It's not that it's bad, it's just partial. So obviously things like mathematics and English and our own indigenous languages and so on are very important, in science. All those basics are critical, teaching people to read and write. So I'm not suggesting for a second we don't need those things, but we need more than just that. And so education has to become a lot more multidimensional. And if one looks at all the frameworks coming out, whether it's from World Economic Forum or Center for Curriculum Redesign or UNICEF or anybody, then you start to see this multidimensionality in education. And how we think of it is that the content and what you learn is just one part of the equation. The process for learning has to be made a lot more efficient, and that content has to be expanded into skills and values and experience and so on. But the missing ingredient in our education, which is what we focus on so much, is on the human being themselves, and that is chronically underdeveloped. And we've got hundreds of millions of people across Africa suffering from trauma, anxiety, depression, anger, fear, etc. How do people learn if they're dealing with all of the stuff going on in their heads all day, every day? And if education's only teaching them when Christopher Columbus sailed to America and how to do your 12 times table, and you never ever deal with the fact that this young woman has been abused and things like that, that is shameful education, and it's completely incomplete and it's going to have very, very partial results and very poor results, frankly, if you look at the results. Whereas if you deal with the whole person and this whole educational equation, then results are beautiful, magnificent, completely transformed and repeatable and reliable and scalable. And it's just obvious. So I think the thing is, we were all educated in this old paradigm. If we continue in this old paradigm, nothing will change, or very little will change. We'll have growing inequality in our societies. We've just got, one super rich person, 99 suffering, maybe a few in the middle class, but growing inequality from a very, very poor and unequal kind of education that we give young people. So now's the time we can change everything. We can give knowledge and information to everybody. We can make education complete. There are beautiful models that are working all over the show. Let's all be learning and sharing from these things. And, we can't look back in 20 years' time and be talking about the same things. Then we've completely failed the young people of our generation, and we don't have time. So anyway, I hope that answers your question, Peris, but thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ted. I think you've touched on very key issues in terms of really looking at the holistic education in times of COVID, and in line with what we know about education, the education system in Africa. And as you've also shared, it's then the role of key players and stakeholders, and how do we get them to really develop deeper alliances with us, so that then we're building a movement that can transform. And with that, I would like to invite Nombulelo, looking at her work rallying stakeholders towards achievement of the aspirations of Agenda 2063 for Africa that has young people at the core. So how do we rally stakeholders to really create deeper engagement, meaningful engagement that are really transformative, addressing the gaps and the gains that have been made, as shared by Karima and Dr. Taddy?
Thank you for the question, Peris. I think, yes, you're right. Karima and Teddy have touched on the key elements and the need of collaboration and scale. I think that we need to create a well-structured platform for stakeholders to engage each other. Because at the moment, like Karim has said before, that we are really running in these big fragmented silos, and we are not necessarily collaborating. Yet it would be really helpful to get one coordinated, well, not really one, but a sort of a coordination where stakeholders meet each other to either learn from each other or even share resources. Because actually, I personally think we already have found great solutions which could be replicated in other countries as well, and different regions of Africa. But now what's missing is that how do these actors identify and reach out to each other? So I think this platform would really be useful, that it would help accelerate systematically to know where to get what and how to get the right influence that one needs in order to be as impactful as possible. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure. And it actually leads us to the next question. And if I look at the chart, I can see that some people have actually begun looking at then how do we move forward collaboratively to ensure that we are working as a team to really transform. So some of the questions coming out or input from the chart that touch on what we are discussing is, one is Africa ready for alternative learning?
I don't think it's, I don't think, sometimes I think the questions we ask point us in a direction. And I would rephrase the question as to, has Africa been engaging alternative learning? I think we've already seen so much evidence of where alternative learning has been bearing its fruit. One of the reasons why I founded Imagination Africa in 2011 was because I had noticed where children were already being very imaginative and were already doing problem solving. Many young people who are not employed, whether it's your local mechanic, whether it's the person who comes and fixes your fridge, very often these are people who haven't had any kind of formal learning. So I think we're already engaged in alternative learning. And I think what we really are trying to do is to really say whether Taddy spoke, I thought, brilliantly about the importance of project-based learning. And what project-based learning offers is the ability to be able to develop transversal skills and competencies by looking at something from a variety of different angles. And I think that that's something that's very natural to how children learn. So actually, yes, I do think. Are our systems ready for it? No. But I do think we've heard about, the idea of creating platforms to support our systems. We heard about how we can bring different actors and find different champions who can support what institutionalizing or formalizing what some of these alternative learning spaces are happening. So I think there's so much we can do that sometimes, asking big questions about whether Africa is ready. Well, we're a big continent. We have so many different, Taddy mentioned there's so many parts of the continent that are mired in some very real issues. But those are issues where we can actually have different kinds of learning systems that can come in, that can address, as you said, the whole child, that can actually do healing. We've seen examples of that from across the continent. So again, it's really powerful when we work with children, when we work with young people as educators. We're very mindful of the questions that we ask, because we understand that the question is not a yes or no. The question is about how do we provoke learning. How do we get people to be curious and think about things differently? So I would maybe reframe that question to be thinking about, where's alternative learning happening in the communities I'm in? Who do I need to support, or how do I connect with them? How do I amplify their voices? Who are those champions that exist? Taddy talked about, for instance, it's hard. Ecosystem building, I think, is one of the hardest things to do. But once we can identify champions, whether they're social entrepreneurs, whether it's the one guy in the Ministry of Education who, every time you come in, will help you make sure you get past the secretary to see, whether it's the person on the community board, they're always champions. How do you support those people? Because those are the people who are going to be able to affect change, and that will actually help you build those alternative systems. Thank you.
Peris, can I just add a very short thing to what Karima just said?
Yes.
And I completely agree with everything Karima's just said. But yeah, I think we kind of need to change a question like that, as Karima says, are people in Africa ready for alternative education? I think people in Africa everywhere are ready for solutions. And if you can show you've got something that works, you cannot argue with success. It's just, that's what it is. Success speaks for itself. So whether it's alternative or mainstream or whatever, I think people are much less worried now about how you do something than actually can you achieve results. And if you can start something, whether it's in Kenya, like you're talking about, that you're starting to work on that, the early years are hard because you don't have believers, you don't have results, and you have to have a lot of faith in yourself and in your methodologies and your colleagues and so on. But the moment you start to have results, you've got to start showing those to people, and you've got to let your beneficiaries tell people about what has happened to them and why this thing has changed their life and so on. But you cannot argue with success. So all of us involved in alternative education or any kind of educational approaches where we're trying to rectify, what is missing in education, etc. We've got to have tremendous courage, tremendous faith, get on with it, do proper M&E, show your results, measure your results, and then share that with people, because no one is going to argue with you if you can prove success. It doesn't matter who's ready for what. If you prove success, they will listen to you and it will grow. It's just that simple.
Thank you very much. I think I'm being told we have like 5 minutes to go. So that means we don't have much time, but I think it will be an injustice if we leave here without hearing from everyone who attended the session in terms of now what is really the future of education in Africa. So in short, I'm asking you, what are you committing to make this happen and work? So if we can all take a minute to just type quickly, we would like to harness all these responses. So I think it's easier to just put them on the chat. So what is the future of education in Africa? We've looked at the challenges, we've looked at the wonderful things that are happening. We've had discussions on where we are. So in our own understanding, in our own work, and in our own aspirations, what is or should be the future of education in Africa? Is the future digital? I'm seeing some people are saying there's more to it. It's not the only way to go. More cross-country stroke regional initiatives. Thanks, Karima. Approach the whole person, including treating trauma amongst girls. Thank you. So whole child education, parent education. Any other idea on what should be the future? Future of education in Africa is holistic, mass scale, transforming it by moving towards critical and problem-solving assessments, more hybrid, ongoing teacher training, quality education, keep them coming, strengthen financial literacy. So then we are the people who are interested in education. I'm assuming that's why we are here. And we are also the people that are making contribution towards education. So how then do we move forward from here? Because we cannot finish or complete this conversation in just this sitting. So how do we move from here? And to help us in that, I would like to invite my colleague Ify to just share briefly about an initiative that we've started, and then she will put the link on the chat for us to join, so that then we can continue this conversation and actually actualize on our dreams and aspirations for the future of Africa. So Ify.
Thank you, Peris. I just added the link so they can click on the link to join. So we have started a collaborative initiative where we are not just talking, but we are collectively working towards transforming the field of education. This is an initiative that brings together the key stakeholders or the key players in education together to look at what the problems in education are, and then collectively figure out what the solution is, have several conversations, work at it, get our hands dirty, and then start to figure out what areas we need to focus on first, who we need to bring into the conversation, what our target audience would be, and at the end of the day, collectively transform the field of education. I just added the link for you to click on it, fill the form, and then we'll get back to you soon. Thank you so much. Thank you, Peris.
So thank you. So basically, to take us to the next level, if he has already wrapped it up, we will take all these aspirations for the future of education in Africa. And so join us in this group so that we can actualize it. And just to conclude, I want to give our three panelists 1 minute each to close the session for us. So starting with Nombulelo.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the community and to just explore ideas on how we could all accelerate education and improve it. I look forward to engaging with post this and finding collaborative initiatives that we could possibly collaborate on. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peris. Thank you, Ashoka.
Karima.
Yes, really a huge thank to Ashoka, who I think has been talking about systems change in education and really supporting social entrepreneurs for many years. So as more and more people come into the field, we're excited, we're happy to see our ecosystems expanding, but really wanting to acknowledge the hard work of so many people, particularly on the continent of Africa, through Ashoka, that have been doing this work. We look forward to really expanding what learning looks like, and really creating more actors who are education actors. So for us specifically with this project, we're talking about how do we get the media involved? how can the media support and create programming for children, particularly preschool education, because we've talked generally about education, but it all begins from 0 to 5. 90% of the human brain is happening then. So a lot of what we're dealing with in Africa has a lot to do with the environments that our children are being born in and how they're being raised from 0 to 5. So again, please never forget early childhood agendas, even as we are championing higher education or primary or middle school. Early childhood is absolutely essential, and early childhood is the one space where we're no longer talking just about classrooms, but we're talking about home environments, community environments. So, and again, it's always wonderful to be with Taddy Blecher. So I hope to come and see you in South Africa soon, my brother.
Thank you, Karima. Thanks so much. And just thank you to everyone for joining this beautiful session, and just such a great turnout, and so grateful so many people are interested in education. It is just that one thing. You know, a lot of people don't put their interest in education because they think it's so long term and they want quick results and things like that. But if you want any kind of results for the long term, you've got to get education right. Otherwise, everything else is a waste of time, because human development is central to every field of life, of course, on Earth. So just thank you so much to Ashoka for arranging this, and for everyone for your time and interest. I just wanted to say in conclusion, you know, for all of us involved in this field, and gee, some of us have been in it for decades, it is hard, you can get tired, we're getting towards the end of a hard year, COVID and everything. And I just wanted to say to everybody, please never give up. It doesn't matter what goes on, never give up. Have faith, hold on, have a holiday during December, take some time out to refresh. All of us have to do it, even though everything is burning and there's no time for anything. But there's truly never been a more exciting time for education. And I just think this is the time now we can absolutely transform the future of education at a micro level, at a macro level, at a system change level. Governments want to change. They're so open to change. If you can just show them how, if people can work together and so on. So just God bless everybody involved in this beautiful field of looking after the children of Africa, and nothing more exciting and wonderful that we're all involved in on a daily basis. So thank you very much. Ife, I don't know if you can tell us what we need to do now and how we all get into the next sessions.
So thank you so much. I don't have much to say. I think it's just to remind you, we have once we go back to the main session, we'll have a marketplace, so you can still interact with Taddy and Karima and explore opportunities for collaboration and scaling of the innovations that they're already working on. And then for a long-term conversation and engagement in education in Africa, please click on the link that Ife has shared. We are working with Agenda 2063 and other partners and all the social entrepreneurs in our network to transform education in Africa. So join us and let's make it happen. Remember that COVID-19 has given us the urgency to make the paradigm shift now. And as Dr. Taddy Blecher has said, and Karima, is that governments are willing, people are willing, everyone is looking for solutions. So let's share what we have.